you understand collective impact to be now? Like it became this force, this idea, and do you think it's kind of evolved now since you first heard about it? I mean, I'm sure you could actually remember the meeting that you first heard about it. Matter of fact, it's well recorded.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and kind of before it had a name, it was an understanding about its impact in communities. And in some ways it started, and hopefully we can talk about this a little bit later, but was rooted in the fact that the president would always say the best ideas are being formed outside of Washington, D.C. So let's get a better understanding of what those ideas are and how communities are attacking those problems. And collective impact ultimately was the name that was put on what we were seeing, which was a very disciplined form of community collaboration. I mean, we know that it has 5 very distinct elements to it. And we also know, however, that collaboration isn't new. There was no sense that we were discovering fire and the wheel, that people had been collaborating for quite some time, that people had been forming partnerships across sectors for some time. But what we saw was the fact that the most successful communities were doing something that was very, very specific when they were able to be successful and attack the big challenges in front of them, that they were forming a shared or a common agenda. And I think all of us on the call can think about the times when we were working with someone and we all thought we were pulling the wagon in the same direction, and somewhere along the way we realized that we were moving in 4 or 5 different directions. And obviously you can't achieve your goal, you can't get over the finish line if you're not all pulling the same direction. So that common agenda is one of the key elements of collective impact. And also this idea of shared measurement systems. Again, understanding the problem, but also understanding how communities were going about confronting the problem, an agreed upon way to measure what they wanted to achieve and measure benchmarks along the way, and collect data to do that was something that we saw happening in the most successful communities. And certainly this idea of mutually reinforcing activities. Again, everyone doesn't have to be doing the exact same thing. In fact, they shouldn't in cross-sector collaboration. But the idea that the many pieces are working in an organized and collaborative way, that they were reinforcing one another in an effort to move to that goal was something that's critical. And fourth, this idea of continuous communication. And we know this, even from our own personal relationships, that if you aren't constantly communicating, then there's the reality that you can move off track. So we could see the entities that were working together toward this big goal in constant communication to ensure that they understood where they were, what one another was doing, and that they were still moving in the right direction. And then finally, this critical idea of a backbone institution or organization, that entity that would orchestrate the work that was happening, because you have so many different pieces that were moving in a coordinated fashion. And that backbone was critical, and the elements of what a backbone is and what a backbone isn't were also things that we found to be important. So those were the pieces that we were seeing and understood to be collective impact in the work that I was doing at the White House. And you all, FSG, the White House Council, and others continue to deepen that work. Now the White House Council has taken on, its work is being done in really the name of the Aspen Institute. We picked up that mantle at the Aspen Institute, and to help new communities better understand how to engage and how to build a field so that we can support each other and we can advance this strategy much more quickly. The piece that John and his colleagues wrote that was in the Stanford Social Innovation Review about collective impact, I think it remains to this day the most widely read, widely shared article that was in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. Now, we all acknowledge that the Stanford Social Innovation Review isn't the New York Times, but it does underscore the fact that people are really hungering for these smart ideas and a discipline around these ideas to be able to move forward, because people see the challenges in their communities that aren't being otherwise solved. And a lot of resources, a lot of time, a lot of very smart people, and indeed a lot of very smart effective programs have been out there for quite some time, but what we're finding is that if we're going to affect change, really complex problems, and we're doing it at scale, that we need the elements of collective impact if we're going to do that successfully. I think that's why we see the number of people engaged in the Collective Impact Forum, why people were sharing that article so widely, why we're having this conversation across our borders.